The crystal wine glass shattered against the imported Italian marble, sending shards across my brother's dining room floor. "You're 45 years old, Madison. When are you going to grow up and get a real job?" My sister-in-law Rebecca's voice cut through the pre-Thanksgiving chaos like one of her beloved Henkel's knives. The same knives she'd received as a wedding gift from my trust fund 20 years ago. "I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss." I stood in the doorway of Christopher's McMansion, holding my famous pumpkin cheesecake that I'd spent 12 hours perfecting. The same dessert that had won 3 county fair blue ribbons and been featured in Southern Living magazine. But apparently, being a pastry chef and owning a small bakery wasn't a real job in the Sterling family hierarchy. "The kids' table is in the sunroom," Rebecca continued, not even looking up from her iPad where she was undoubtedly checking her stock portfolio. "We thought it would be better this year, more appropriate." My nephew Tyler, who was 16 and spent most family gatherings vaping behind the pool house, would be sitting at the adult table. My niece Sophia, 14 and perpetually attached to her phone, had already claimed her spot next to her mother. But Madison Sterling, executor of the family trust, and the person who'd managed to turn our grandfather's modest inheritance into a multi-million-dollar portfolio, was being relegated to sit with the 7-year-olds. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my siblings had burned through their trust fund allowances on McMansions, European vacations, and private school tuitions, I'd lived modestly. My 2-bedroom apartment above my bakery might not have impressed the country club set, but it was paid for. Every penny I'd saved went back into investments, carefully growing the portfolio that now supported the entire extended family's lifestyle. Christopher appeared in the doorway of his home office, still wearing his golf clothes, despite it being past 4 in the afternoon. "Maddie, good to see you." His greeting was perfunctory, the same tone he used with the valet at his club. "Did Rebecca explain the seating situation?" "She mentioned something about the kids' table." I kept my voice neutral, a skill I'd perfected during countless board meetings with hostile executives. "Yeah, well, we're trying something new this year. The Wetheringtons are joining us, from the club, and we thought it would be better to keep the conversation more professional. You understand. The Wetheringtons. Of course." Christopher had been trying to get Harold Wetherington to invest in his latest business venture for months. Another tech startup that would probably fail like the previous 4, all funded by generous distributions from the family trust. Distributions I had approved against my better judgment, because family was family. My younger sister Charlotte breezed in, her designer heels clicking against the marble. "Oh, good. You brought dessert. Just put it in the kitchen. Maria will handle it." She air-kissed my cheek, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "Love the outfit. Very practical." I glanced down at my carefully chosen ensemble, a cashmere sweater and well-tailored slacks. Nothing flashy, but quality pieces that would last for years. Unlike Charlotte's trendy designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, payment and would be out of style by spring, the kitchen was a hive of activity. Maria, the housekeeper, gave me a sympathetic smile as I set down my cheesecake. She'd worked for Christopher's family for 5 years and had seen her share of Sterling family dynamics. "Beautiful cake, Miss Madison, like always." "Thank you, Maria." I helped her arrange the appetizers on a sterling silver platter, another trust fund purchase. "How's your daughter doing at college?" Her face lit up. "Excellent. She made the dean's list again. The scholarship you helped her get has been such a blessing. She earned that scholarship. I just pointed her in the right direction." What I didn't mention was that the scholarship came from a foundation I'd quietly established 5 years ago, funded by my personal investment returns. None of my siblings knew about it. They were too busy spending their quarterly distributions to notice where the money actually came from. The dining room was a testament to Rebecca's interior design aspirations. Every piece carefully curated to impress, from the hand-blown glass chandelier to the custom-made table that seated 20. Everything screamed new money trying desperately to look like old money. I made my way to the sunroom, where a folding table had been set up with paper plates and plastic cups. The contrast was deliberate, I was certain. 3 of my young cousins were already seated, along with Charlotte's twins who were visiting for the holiday. "Aunt Maddie," 7-year-old Emma bounced in her chair. "Are you sitting with us?" Looks, "Like it, sweetheart." "Cool. Mom says you make the best cookies in the world. Is that true?" "Well, I do own a bakery, so I make quite a few cookies." "A bakery?" 10-year-old James looked impressed. "Like, a real one? With customers and everything?" "With customers and everything. Maybe you can visit sometime." The kids' enthusiasm was genuine, unlike the forced politeness of the adult conversations drifting in from the formal dining room. I could hear Christopher's booming laugh, the one he reserved for potential investors. Harold Wetherington's distinctive southern drawl responded with something about market projections. Charlotte's husband, William, appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable. "Madison, this wasn't my idea. The seating arrangement, I mean." William had always been the most decent of the bunch. A pediatrician who actually cared about his work. He'd married into the Sterling Circus 15 years ago and still seemed bewildered by the family dynamics. "It's fine, William. Really." But it wasn't fine. It was calculated humiliation, designed to put me in my place. The message was clear. No matter how much money I managed, no matter how successful my business, I would always be the unmarried, childless sister who didn't quite measure up to their standards of success. Dinner was served precisely at 6. From the sunroom, I could hear the formal dinner progressing, the clink of real silverware on china, the murmur of adult conversation punctuated by carefully timed laughter. The kids and I ate our turkey and sides off paper plates, but honestly, their company was preferable. "Why don't you sit with the grown-ups?" Emma asked innocently. Before I could answer, James piped up. "My mom says Aunt Maddie is different. She doesn't care about important things." "What kind of important things?" I asked, curious to hear Charlotte's version of my shortcomings. "I don't know. Grown-up stuff, I guess. Money and houses and cars." The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. I cared about money more than any of them, just not in the way they understood. While they cared about spending it, I cared about growing it, protecting it, making it work for future generations. The trust fund they all depended on had tripled in value under my management, but that didn't count as important in their eyes. After dinner, while the kids were settled in the family room with a movie, I wandered onto the back terrace. The November air was crisp, and I pulled my cashmere cardigan tighter. Through the French doors, I could see the adults gathered in the living room, cognac and coffee being served on the Waterford crystal set that had been our grandmother's. "Madison." Harold Wetherington's voice startled me. "I thought I saw you. Step out. Mind if I join you?" Of course not. He was a distinguished man in his 70s, with the kind of quiet confidence that came from old money properly managed. Unlike Christopher, he didn't need to broadcast his wealth. "I have to confess," he said, lighting a cigarette. "I know exactly who you are. You're Eleanor Sterling's granddaughter, the one who manages the family trust." I raised an eyebrow. "Christopher? Told you that?" He chuckled. "God, no. Your brother thinks I have no idea who handles their finances. But I did my due diligence before coming here. Madison Sterling, graduated summa cum laude from Wharton, worked at Goldman Sachs for 5 years before taking over the family trust, turned a modest inheritance into an impressive portfolio, and somehow also finds time to run a successful bakery. You've done your homework. I always do. Which is why I'm confused about—" He gestured toward the house. "All this. The kids' table? Really? Family dynamics are complicated." "Indeed. But here's what puzzles me. Your brother has pitched me 3 different business ideas in the last 6 months, each one worse than the last. Yet he lives in this house, drives a Maserati, and his wife drops $50,000 at charity auctions without blinking. That money comes from somewhere. I remained silent. And your sister Charlotte. Her husband's a pediatrician. Good profession, but not buy a beach house in the Hamptons money. Yet there it is, purchased last summer. Again, that money comes from somewhere. Mr. Wetherington, Harold, please. And I'm not prying. Well, not exactly. I'm just curious. Why someone with your financial acumen would tolerate being treated like the poor relation when you're clearly the one keeping the ship afloat. Before I could respond, Rebecca's sharp voice cut through the night air. Madison, could you help with the coffee service? Maria's busy with the children. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. I excused myself and went inside. The request was another calculated, slight. Despite having a full-time housekeeper and a catering staff for the evening, they needed me to serve coffee like hired help. I entered the living room carrying the silver coffee service. Christopher was mid-story, regaling the Wetheringtons with tales of his latest business venture, something involving AI and cryptocurrency that he clearly didn't understand. Of course, the initial investment is substantial, he was saying, but the returns will be astronomical. I've had my people run the numbers. His people. That would be me, and I hadn't run any numbers because he hadn't asked. This was the first I was hearing of cryptocurrency anything, Charlotte chimed in. Christopher's always been the visionary in the family, just like Daddy. Our father, who had nearly bankrupted the family business before our grandfather stepped in. Another sterling family myth, carefully cultivated and zealously maintained. As I poured coffee, I caught Harold's eye. He gave me the slightest nod, as if to say he knew exactly what was happening. The evening dragged on. Every few minutes, someone would find a reason to remind me of my place. Could I check on the kids? Would I mind clearing these plates? Had I remembered to bring the special creamer that Charlotte liked? Finally, around 10, people began making their excuses. The Wetheringtons were the first to leave, Harold shaking Christopher's hand with professional courtesy, but no enthusiasm. As he passed me in the foyer, he slipped a business card into my hand. In case you ever want to discuss real investment opportunities, he said quietly, someone with your talents shouldn't be hidden in the kitchen. After the guests left, I returned to the sunroom to gather my things. The paper plates and plastic cups had been cleared, but the folding table remained, a stark reminder of the evening's message. Leaving already? Rebecca appeared in the doorway, wineglass in hand. Her fourth or fifth of the evening by my count. We're about to open the Chateau d'Yquem. Christopher's been saving it for a special occasion. I have an early morning tomorrow. The bakery opens at 6. Right, the bakery. She said it the way someone might say, the hobby, or the little project. You know, Madison, if you ever want to do something more substantial with your life, Christopher knows people. Real business connections. You could probably get an entry-level position somewhere decent. Entry-level. After running a successful business for 8 years and managing a multi-million-dollar trust portfolio, the condescension was breathtaking. I'll keep that in mind. And maybe next year. She paused, swaying slightly. Maybe next year you could bring someone? A +1? It would make the seating arrangements easier. There it was. The final insult. My single status, by choice, though they'd never believe that, was just another mark against me in their ledger of success and failure. I drove home in silence, my pumpkin cheesecake untouched in its carrier on the passenger seat. They'd served store-bought pies instead, claiming they'd forgotten about my dessert. The lights of my bakery glowed warmly as I parked in the alley behind the building. Sweet dreams. Bakery and cafe wasn't much to look at from the outside, just another storefront in a row of small businesses. But inside, every detail reflected my vision. The vintage display cases I'd restored myself. The Italian espresso machine that had cost more than my first car. The marble countertops where I rolled out dough every morning before dawn. Upstairs, my apartment was cozy and neat. No marble floors or crystal chandeliers, but every piece was chosen with care. The antique desk where I worked on trust documents. The kitchen where I tested new recipes. The small balcony overlooking the park where I drank my morning coffee and watched the sunrise. I settled into my desk chair and opened my laptop. The trust documents were password protected, several layers of security that only I could access. The quarterly distributions were due next week. Christopher was expecting his usual amount, enough to cover the mortgage on his McMansion, the country club fees, the private school tuition, and Rebecca's shopping habits. Charlotte's check would cover similar expenses, plus the maintenance on that Hamptons beach house. They'd been receiving these distributions for 15 years, ever since our parents died, and I took over managing the trust. Not once had either of them asked where the money came from or how it had grown. They simply expected the checks to arrive, like they expected the sun to rise. I pulled up the investment portfolio. My conservative management had paid off handsomely. The trust was worth more than ever, despite the generous distributions. My own business investments, completely separate from the family money, had done even better. The bakery was profitable, but it was just the tip of the iceberg. Real estate. Investments. A small venture capital fund. Strategic stock positions in companies I'd researched thoroughly. None of my siblings knew about any of it. They thought I was just the sister who played with flour and sugar all day, who couldn't hold down a real job, who needed to be seated with the children because I couldn't contribute to adult conversation. I closed the laptop and made myself a cup of tea. Tomorrow was Friday. Black Friday, actually. The bakery would be swamped with holiday orders. I had 50 pumpkin pies to bake, along with our regular inventory. Real work. The kind that required skill and dedication and didn't involve impressing anyone at the country club. But as I sipped my tea, I kept thinking about that folding table in the sunroom. The paper plates, the plastic cups, the careful, deliberate humiliation of it all. For 15 years, I'd been the silent benefactor, the invisible hand that kept them all afloat. I'd tolerated their condescension, their pity, their assumptions about my life. I'd signed the checks and managed the investments, and never once reminded them who really kept the lights on in their perfect suburban kingdoms. Maybe it was time for that to change. Black Friday at Sweet Dreams Bakery started at 4 in the morning. The scent of cinnamon and nutmeg filled the air as I pulled the first batch of pumpkin pies from the oven. My assistant baker, Jorge, was already working on the dinner rolls, his practiced hands shaping dough with mechanical precision. "Morning, boss. How was Thanksgiving?" "Educational," I replied, sliding another batch of pies into the oven. Jorge laughed. "That's bad, huh? Let me guess. Your brother's place again? Kids' table this year. Apparently I've been promoted. Or demoted. Hard to tell with my family." He shook his head. "Man, your siblings don't deserve you. You know that, right?" The morning rush started at 6. By 7, we had a line out the door. The regulars came first. Construction workers grabbing coffee and pastries before their shifts. Nurses ending their night rotations. Small business owners preparing for the shopping chaos ahead. These were my people, the ones who understood that real work started before dawn. Around 9, my phone buzzed. A text from Charlotte. "Can you transfer extra this month? Holiday shopping is insane, and William's being difficult about the credit." "Cards!" I set the phone aside without responding and focused on boxing up an order of cookies for the children's hospital. Every year, I donated hundreds of cookies for their holiday party. The administrator had asked if they could name me as a sponsor, put my bakery's name on the program. I'd declined. Anonymous felt better. By noon, we'd sold out of pumpkin pies. Customers were already placing orders for Christmas. Mrs. Patterson, who'd been coming in every Friday for 5 years, asked about my pecan pie recipe. Family secret. I told her with a wink. Your grandmother's? Something like that. The truth was, I'd developed the recipe myself through dozens of iterations. But people liked the idea of family traditions, handed down secrets from generation to generation. They didn't need to know that my own family had never valued my culinary skills enough to ask for recipes. At 2, Harold Wetherington walked through the door. He looked out of place in his Armani suit, but he surveyed the bakery with apparent approval. The mismatched vintage chairs, the exposed brick walls, the chalkboard menu written in my own hand. Everything Christopher would consider quaint or shabby. Mr. Wetherington, I didn't expect to see you here. Harold, please. And why not? I heard you make the best coffee in the city. I poured him a cup of our house blend, a special roast I'd worked with a local coffee importer to develop. He took a sip and raised his eyebrows appreciatively. That's exceptional. Colombian? Guatemalan. Actually, single origin from a small cooperative farm. They use traditional shade-growing methods. You source your own coffee beans? I source everything personally. The flour comes from a heritage grain mill in Kansas. The butter is from a local dairy that grass feeds their cows. Even the vanilla, I import it directly from Madagascar. He studied me over his cup. You approach this business the same way you manage the trust. Attention to detail, quality over flash. Most people don't notice the difference. The right people do. He glanced around. May I ask you something personal? I nodded. Why do you let them treat you that way? Your family, I mean. You could buy and sell them 10 times over. You've really done your research. I'm thorough. Your personal portfolio is impressive. The real estate holdings alone, very strategic choices. That warehouse district you invested in 5 years ago? It's worth triple now. I wiped down the espresso machine, considering my words. Money isn't everything to them. It's about perception, status. I don't fit their image of success. Because you choose substance over style? Because I choose independence over conformity. He nodded slowly. I turned down your brother's proposal, by the way. Not because it was bad, though it was terrible, but because I don't invest with people who don't understand their own finances. He couldn't answer basic questions about cash flow or ROI, kept deflecting to his financial person. That would be me. That's what I figured. Tell me, does he even know how trust works? He knows. Checks arrive quarterly, that's about it. The afternoon brought a familiar face. My nephew, Tyler. He slouched in, looking uncomfortable in his designer clothes and expensive sneakers. He glanced around nervously before approaching the counter. Hey, Aunt Maddie. Tyler. What brings you? Here. He shuffled his feet. I heard you might be hiring? For the holidays? I studied with him. At 16, Tyler had never worked a day in his life. Christopher made sure of that. You want to work here? At the bakery? Yeah. I mean, if you'll have me, Mom and Dad don't know I'm here. They'd probably freak. Why do you want to work? He met my eyes for the first time. Because I'm tired of being useless. Emma, you know, my little cousin. She asked me last night what I was good at, and I couldn't answer. You run this whole place. You make things. Real things that people want. I want to learn how to do something that matters. The sincerity in his voice caught me off guard. It's hard work, early mornings, hot kitchens, demanding customers. I know, Jorge told me. At my surprised look, he continued. I've been talking to him. He works out at my gym. He told me about the job, said you're the best boss he's ever had. When would you want to start? Tomorrow, if that's okay. We're off school for Thanksgiving break. I made a decision. Be here at 5 a.m. Wear comfortable shoes and clothes you don't mind getting dirty. We'll start you on prep work. His face lit up. Really? You'll give me a shot? Everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves. As he left, practically bouncing with excitement, I wondered what Christopher would say when he found out. Not that it mattered. Tyler was old enough to make his own choices. The rest of the day flew by. By closing time at 6, we'd served over 300 customers. Jorge and the other staff headed home, exhausted but satisfied. I stayed behind to prep for tomorrow and handle paperwork. My office was a converted storage room above the kitchen, small but functional, with a window overlooking the alley. I kept 2 separate desks, one for bakery business, one for trust management. The November statements were waiting for review. Christopher's portfolio had taken another hit. His latest venture, the one he'd pitched to Harold, was already hemorrhaging money. Charlotte's spending had increased 40% over last year. The trust could handle it, but the trend was concerning. I pulled up the trust documents. Our grandparents had been specific in their instructions. The trust was to be managed conservatively, with distributions made for health, education, maintenance, and support. But they'd also included a crucial clause. The trustee had full discretion to modify or suspend distributions if beneficiaries engaged in conduct detrimental to the family's reputation or financial stability. I'd never invoked that clause, never even considered it. Family was family, after all. But as I reviewed the numbers, a pattern emerged. Christopher had burned through nearly $2 million in failed businesses over the past decade. Charlotte's spending was approaching unsustainable levels. Meanwhile, my own draws from the trust were minimal, just enough to cover health insurance and basic expenses. My phone rang. Rebecca. Madison, we need to discuss Christmas. I've booked the club for December 18th. We'll need you to handle the desserts, of course. And could you pick up the gifts for the staff? You know I'm terrible at that sort of thing. Actually, I might not be available. Don't be ridiculous. It's a family Christmas. Of course you'll be there. Oh, and this year we're doing a white elephant exchange. $25 limit. Nothing too cheap looking, please. She hung up before I could respond. $25. They'd spend more than that on a single bottle of wine, but gift exchanges had limits. Everything with them was about appearances, not substance. My laptop chimed. An email from Charlotte. Urgent. Need advance on January distribution. Visa bill due. Please wire ASAP. Another from Christopher. Maddie, can you move some funds around? New opportunities need to move fast. $100K should do it. I closed the laptop without responding and went downstairs to the kitchen. Baking helped me think. I started a batch of sourdough, my grandmother's actual recipe, the one she'd taught me when I was 12. She'd been different from the rest of the family. Practical, grounded. She'd seen something in me that the others missed. As I kneaded the dough, I thought about Harold's question. Why did I let them treat me that way? The answer was complicated. Guilt, perhaps. I'd survived our parents' car accident while being the only one home that night. Obligation to family. Fear of being alone. But mostly, I realized it was a habit. 15 years of being the responsible one, the silent benefactor, the keeper of secrets. 15 years of enabling their behavior while accepting their condescension. The dough was smooth and elastic under my hands. Perfect. I set it aside to rise and started on tomorrow's croissant dough. The lamination process required patience, folding butter into the dough, rolling it out, folding again, layer after layer, building something complex and beautiful from simple ingredients. My phone buzzed. Another text from Christopher. Hello? Need that transfer tonight. Don't leave me hanging. Then Charlotte. Madison, this is important. Call me back. I silenced the phone and focused on the dough. There was something meditative about baking. The precision. The transformation of basic ingredients into something greater. The delayed gratification. You couldn't rush good bread. By the time I finished, it was nearly midnight. The kitchen was clean, and tomorrow's prep is complete. I locked up and climbed the stairs to my apartment, my phone still buzzing with increasingly frustrated messages from my siblings. In the morning, I'd have to make a decision. Continue enabling their lifestyle while accepting their disrespect, or finally invoke that clause our grandparents had wisely included. The nuclear option, Christopher would call it. The end of their free ride. I made a cup of chamomile tea and settled into my reading chair. On the side table sat a photo from last Thanksgiving. The whole family posed in Christopher's living room, everyone smiling for the camera. I was in the back, partially hidden behind Charlotte's husband. Even in family photos, I was relegated to the margins, but I was also the one holding everything together. The invisible foundation their lives were built on. What would happen if that foundation shifted? My laptop was still open on the desk. The trust documents glowed on the screen. One click could change everything. One decision could upend their carefully constructed worlds. I thought about Tyler, eager to learn, wanting to be useful. About Jorge, who worked hard and took pride in his craft. About Mrs. Patterson and all the regulars who saw value in what I did. About Harold Wetherington, who recognized my worth even if my own family didn't. Tomorrow, Tyler would show up at 5 a.m., ready to work. He'd learn to measure flour, cream butter, shape dough. He'd discover the satisfaction of creating something with his own hands. Maybe it would change him. Maybe it would show him a different path than the one his parents had mapped out. I saved the trust documents and backed them up to the cloud. Then I drafted 2 letters, one to Christopher, one to Charlotte. Direct, professional. Explaining that due to concerning financial patterns and conduct detrimental to the family's reputation, their distributions would be suspended pending a full review. They'd have 30 days to provide detailed accounting of their expenditures and submit plans for financial independence. The letters sat in my drafts folder, unsent, waiting. I finished my tea and went to bed. In 6 hours, I'd be back in the kitchen. Another day of honest work. Another day of building something real while my siblings slept in their borrowed luxury. The decision could wait. But not for long. The foundation was already shifting. Cracks forming in the facade. The kids' table had been their last mistake. You could only push someone so far before they pushed back. Change was coming to the Sterling family. They just didn't know it yet. The Sunday dinner invitation came through Charlotte's assistant. Not even a personal call. Just a crisp message that Mr. and Mrs. Sterling request your presence for dinner. At 7. Smart casual attire. Please confirm. The formality was new. They'd never sent invitations before. Something had shifted. I spent the afternoon in the bakery's commercial kitchen, teaching Tyler the basics of bread making. He'd shown up every morning for the past 3 weeks, eager and attentive. Today, he was attempting his first solo batch of dinner rolls. The dough feels weird, he said, frowning at the mixing bowl. Kind of sticky. That's normal. Here, let me show you the window pane test. I took a small piece, stretching it between my fingers until it was translucent. See, when you can do this without tearing, it's ready. He tried it himself, face scrunched. In concentration. This is harder than it looks. Most worthwhile things are. While the dough rose, we worked on financials. I'd been teaching him basic business math, food costs, profit margins, inventory management. He absorbed it all, asking questions his father never had. Why didn't you go into banking? He asked. I mean, you're brilliant with numbers. I did, for a while. Goldman Sachs, right out of college. His eyes widened. No way. Dad always talks about Goldman like it's the Holy Grail. It's just a job, a well-paying one, but still just moving numbers around. This, I gestured to the kitchen, this feeds people, creates something tangible. Is that why you left? Partly. Also because I wanted to build something of my own, not just manage other people's money. He nodded thoughtfully. Mom thinks you're wasting your talent here. What do you think? I think you're the only one in our family who actually makes anything real. At 6:30, I closed the bakery and headed to Christopher's house. The December air was crisp, Christmas lights twinkling on every suburban McMansion. I'd worn my usual business casual, nice slacks, cashmere sweater, leather flats. Nothing that screamed money, but everything of quality. The house was ablaze, with lights. 3 cars I didn't recognize sat in the circular driveway alongside Christopher's Maserati and Charlotte's Range Rover. I parked my 5-year-old Honda behind the garage, where it wouldn't offend anyone's sensibilities. Rebecca answered, the door wearing a cocktail dress and pearls. Madison, you're early. I checked my watch, 6:55. The invitation said 7. Yes, well, everyone else understood that meant 7:30. Come in, I suppose. The living room was filled with people I didn't recognize. Men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses. Christopher stood by the fireplace, holding court with a group that looked like hedge fund managers. Madison! He waved me over, his smile too bright. Everyone, this is my sister Madison. She runs a little bakery downtown. The group nodded politely, already dismissing me. One woman asked, How charming. Is it a franchise? No, I own it outright. Oh, her interest evaporated. How quaint. Charlotte appeared, champagne flute in hand. Maddie, you came. I was worried you'd be too busy with your baking. The pause before baking was deliberate, as if she were saying finger painting or basket weaving. I always make time for my family. Speaking of which, Christopher interrupted, we need to discuss some family business. In my study, now. The shift from jovial host to stern businessman was jarring. I followed him down the hall, Charlotte trailing behind with the click of her Louboutins. The study was Christopher's inner sanctum, all dark wood and leather-bound books he'd never read. He closed the door and turned to face me. His expression, grave. We need to talk about trust. I settled into one of the leather chairs. What about it? The December distributions. They're late. They're not due until the 15th. You always send them early, by the 1st. This year, nothing. Charlotte perched on the arm of the sofa. People are asking questions, Madison. Our banker called. The mortgage company. It's embarrassing. I've been reviewing the trust documents, I said calmly. There are some concerns about spending patterns. Christopher's face reddened. Concerns? Who are you to have concerns about how we spend our money? The trustee, the person legally responsible for preserving the trust assets. Preserving? Charlotte laughed, a sharp sound. The trust is worth millions. We're not exactly depleting. Actually, you are. Christopher, your last 5 ventures have lost over $3 million. Charlotte, your spending has increased 60% in 2 years. At this rate, the trust will be depleted within a decade. That's impossible, Christopher sputtered. You're being dramatic. I pulled out my phone, opening the encrypted file. I'd prepared. Here are the numbers. Every transaction, every loss, every questionable expense. Your business dinner at Le Bernardin last month? $8,000. Charlotte's wardrobe update? $90,000 in 1 quarter. They stared at the screen, faces paling. This is our money, Charlotte finally said. Our inheritance. No, it's the family trust. Set up to provide for generations, not to fund your lifestyle inflation. Christopher began pacing. You have no right. I have every right. In fact, I have a fiduciary duty, which is why I'm implementing new procedures. From now on, distributions will be based on demonstrated need. You'll submit detailed budgets. Major expenses will require justification. You can't do this. Charlotte's voice rose. We have obligations, commitments. Then you'll need to adjust them, or find alternative income sources. Alternative income? Christopher laughed bitterly. Like what? Should we all start baking cookies? Tyler seems to think it's worthwhile. The room went silent. Christopher's face darkened further. You've been filling his head with nonsense. He's supposed to be preparing for Princeton, not playing baker. He's learning business fundamentals. Real ones. Not theoretical ventures that hemorrhage cash. How dare you? How dare I what? Teach. Him actual skills? Show him there's value in honest work? He's learned more in 3 weeks than you've taught him in 16 years. Charlotte stood, swaying slightly. This is about Thanksgiving, isn't it? You're being petty because of the seating. No. This is about fiscal responsibility. The kids' table was just the final straw. We're family, Christopher said, his tone shifting to pleading. You can't cut us off. I'm not cutting you off. I'm implementing oversight. The trust will still provide for legitimate needs. But the blank check days are over. What about Christmas? Charlotte's voice cracked. We've already made commitments. The club booking, the catering, perhaps a modest family dinner would be more appropriate. Modest? She spat the word. You want us to live like you? In some tiny apartment wearing clothes from Target? My clothes aren't from Target, though there's nothing wrong with that. But you wouldn't know the difference between quality and labels, would you? A knock interrupted us. Rebecca peered in. Dinner's ready. Our guests are waiting. Christopher straightened his tie. This isn't over, Madison. No, it's just beginning. The dining room was set for 20. I recognized some faces now. The Wetheringtons, the Dunhams from the club, a state senator and his wife. This wasn't just dinner. It was a networking event. Madison, Rebecca's voice was syrupy sweet. I'm afraid we miscounted the place settings. Would you mind terribly eating in the kitchen? Maria could use the company. The insult was breathtaking. In front of their guests, they were relegating me to eat with the help. I caught Harold Wetherington's eye across the room. He looked appalled. Actually, I said, matching her tone, I just remembered I have plans. Enjoy your dinner. I left without looking back, ignoring Christopher's half-hearted call. Outside, the December air felt cleansing after the stuffiness of the house. I sat in my car for a moment, hands shaking, not from anger, but from adrenaline. I'd done it. Thrown the first stone. My phone exploded with messages before I reached the main road. Christopher, Charlotte, Rebecca, even William. All variations on the same theme. How could you? This is betrayal. We're family. I drove to the bakery, seeking the comfort of familiar spaces. The kitchen was dark, but warm from the ovens that never fully cooled. I flipped on the lights and started a batch of cinnamon rolls. Stress baking, Jorge called it. As I worked the dough, my mind processed the confrontation. They'd shown their true colors. Faced with accountability, they'd resorted to exclusion, manipulation, and emotional blackmail. The family card only played when they needed something. Around 9, a knock on the back door interrupted my thoughts. Tyler stood outside, looking miserable. They're losing it, he said, accepting a cup of coffee. Mom's crying, Dad's yelling. They made me leave the dinner. What did you tell them? The truth. That I've been working here. That I'm learning more from you than I ever did. From them, he paused. They forbade me from coming back. And I told them I'm not a child anymore. I make my own choices. He met my eyes. I choose this, if you'll still have me. Of course, but it's going to get ugly. It already is. But you know what? I watched you tonight. You stood up to them. Nobody ever does that. There will be consequences. Good. Maybe it's time for consequences. We worked in companionable silence, prepping for tomorrow's orders. Around midnight, Another unexpected visitor arrived. Harold Wetherington, still in his dinner clothes. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said. "I saw the lights." "Not at all." "Coffee? Please." He looked around the kitchen with interest. "I left shortly. After you. Couldn't stomach the rest of that farce." "It wasn't your usual dinner party?" "God, no. Your brother spent the entire evening trying to get me to invest in his latest scheme. Something about cryptocurrency for pet owners. I don't even know what that means." "Neither does he." Harold laughed. "I believe you. You know, I've been thinking about our conversation at Thanksgiving, about value and perception. And I've decided to make some changes. I'm starting a foundation focused on small business development. Real businesses, not pipe dreams. I want you on the board." "Me?" "You understand what it takes to build something sustainable. That's rare." He paused. "I also want to make an offer. I'm looking to diversify my portfolio. What would it take to buy into your bakery? Not controlling interest, just enough to help you expand." The opportunity was stunning. With proper backing, I could open additional locations, hire more people, like Tyler, who needed chances. "Why would you invest in a bakery?" "Because it's real. Because it serves a community. Because it's run by someone who understands that success isn't just about profit margins." He smiled. "Also, your coffee is exceptional." We talked until nearly 2, sketching out possibilities on flour-dusted napkins. A second location near the hospital. A training program for at-risk youth. Partnerships with local farms. Real growth, not the phantom ventures my brother chased. As Harold left, he paused at the door. "Your family doesn't deserve you, but perhaps that's their loss, not yours." I locked up and headed upstairs. My phone showed 47 missed calls. The family group chat was a disaster zone of accusations and demands. Charlotte had even posted a passive-aggressive message on social media about family betrayal. I muted everything and went to bed. Tomorrow would bring more drama, more emotional manipulation, but it would also bring Tyler, eager to learn. Jorge, steady and skilled. Customers who valued what we offered. The trust documents were already filed. The changes were in motion. They could rage all they wanted. The gravy train had reached its last stop. In the morning, I'd make cinnamon rolls and coffee. I'd teach Tyler about profit margins. I'd review Harold's proposal. I'd build something real while they scrambled to maintain their illusions. The kids' table had been their choice. Now they'd learn what it meant to be cut off from the adult decisions. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to humiliate me, they'd revealed their own dependence, their own childishness. December 15th was 10 days away. When the reduced distributions arrived, enough for basic needs, not luxuries, reality would finally hit. They'd either adapt or implode. Either way, I was done enabling their delusions. The foundation was shifting. The house of cards was falling. And I was perfectly content to watch it tumble while I built something solid on my own ground. The emergency family meeting was called for New Year's Eve. Christopher's lawyer, Marcus Thompson, set it up, insisting on neutral ground. We met at the law offices of Whitman and Associates, mahogany walls, leather chairs, the scent of old money and billable hours. I arrived first, followed by Harold Wetherington, who'd insisted on accompanying me. "You need someone in your corner," he'd said. "Someone who understands both business and family dynamics." Margaret Winters entered next. In person, she looked strikingly like our father. The same sharp jawline, the same calculating eyes. She nodded at me coolly before taking a seat across the conference table. Christopher and Charlotte arrived together, flanked by their spouses and Marcus Thompson. Rebecca wore sunglasses indoors, as if she were some celebrity avoiding paparazzi. Charlotte clutched William's arm like a lifeline. "Let's get straight to business," Marcus began. "We're here to discuss the future of the Sterling Family Trust and the emerging claims against it." "Claims?" I kept my voice steady. The trust parameters are clear. As a trustee, I've acted within my full legal authority. That's debatable, Charlotte interjected. You've arbitrarily cut our distributions based on documented financial irresponsibility. Christopher, would you like to explain the 6 failed businesses? Or Charlotte, perhaps you'd prefer to discuss the $100,000 shopping sprees. Margaret cleared her throat. If I may, I'm not here to challenge Madison's management of the trust. I'm here to claim my rightful share of our father's estate. The room fell silent. Christopher's face went from red to white. Our father's estate was settled 20 years ago. Was it? Margaret produced a manila folder. I have correspondence between our father and my mother dating back 35 years. Promises of financial support, acknowledgments of paternity, and this, she pulled out a document. A codicil to his will, properly witnessed, leaving me 25% of his assets. Charlotte gasped. That's impossible. The will was read. The will that his lawyer presented was read, Margaret corrected. The same lawyer who was being paid by your mother to keep my existence quiet. I've spent 5 years gathering evidence. The codicil was hidden, but not destroyed. Marcus Thompson looked decidedly uncomfortable. We'll need to verify the authenticity. Already done. Margaret's lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Kwan, spoke up. 3 independent experts have authenticated the document, the handwriting, the paper, the notary seal, all genuine. Harold leaned forward. If this is authentic, it changes everything. The trust would need to be restructured to accommodate Margaret's claim. Which is why, Margaret continued, I'm willing to make a deal. I don't want to destroy the trust. I want my fair share, Christopher exploded. Fair share? You weren't part of our family. You didn't grow up with us, didn't what? Margaret's voice turned icy. Didn't suffer through boarding schools while you lived in luxury? Didn't watch my mother work 3 jobs while your mother redecorated the mansion every 2 years? I may not have had the Sterling name, but I have Sterling blood, and now I have legal standing. What exactly do you want? I asked. Patricia Kwan answered. 25% of the trust's current value, paid out over 5 years. In exchange, Margaret will sign a comprehensive release, relinquishing any future claims. 25%? Charlotte looked ill. That would devastate the trust. Actually, I said, pulling out my laptop, it wouldn't. The trust's current value is approximately $42 million. 25% is $10.5 million. Paid over 5 years, that's $2.1 million annually. The trust generates roughly $4 million in returns yearly. It's manageable. Christopher stared at me. 42 million? That can't be right. When Mom and Dad died, it was only worth 8 million. That was 20 years ago. I've been managing it actively. Diversified investments, strategic real estate acquisitions, careful reinvestment of returns, though you've never asked about any of that. Because we trusted you, Charlotte said weakly. No, because you didn't care as long as the checks kept coming. Margaret watched our exchange with interest. I see the family dynamics haven't changed. Madison does all the work while you two reap the benefits. That's none of your concern, Christopher snapped. Actually, it is, because I'm proposing an amendment to my offer. I want Madison to remain as trustee. In fact, I want it stipulated that she cannot be removed without unanimous consent from all beneficiaries. Charlotte's eyes narrowed. Why would you care who manages the trust? Because unlike you, I've done my homework. Madison's track record is impeccable. She's the only reason there's anything left to fight over. Harold nodded approvingly. Patricia Kwan added, We've reviewed the trust's performance under Madison's management. It exceeded market averages by 15% annually. That's exceptional. Fine, Christopher said grudgingly. Madison stays as trustee. but we want the distributions restored to previous levels. No, I said firmly. The new distribution structure remains. Documented needs only, with full transparency. You can't, I can, and I will. And if you challenge it in court, I'll present every receipt, every failed business plan, every frivolous expense. Do you really want that public record? Rebecca finally spoke, her voice shrill. This is extortion. This is accountability. William cleared his throat. If I may, perhaps we should consider the offer. Margaret's claim seems legitimate, and Madison's management has been beneficial, even if her methods are strict. Charlotte turned on him. Whose side are you on? The side of reason? We've been living beyond our means for years. Maybe it's time to face reality. The room erupted in arguments. Christopher accused William of betrayal. Charlotte railed against Margaret's opportunism. Rebecca threatened lawsuits. Through it all, Margaret sat calmly, occasionally exchanging glances with me. Finally, Marcus Thompson called for order. Let's be practical. If Margaret's claim goes to court, it could take years and cost millions in legal fees. The trust would be frozen during litigation, no distributions to anyone. That got their attention. Furthermore, Patricia Kwan added, we've discovered additional documentation. Our father had other relationships. There may be other potential claimants. Christopher's face went gray. Others? At least 2 that we've identified. If this goes to court, they'll come forward. Better to settle now with Margaret than open the floodgates. The negotiations continued for 3 hours. By the end, an agreement was reached. Margaret would receive her 25% over 5 years. I would remain as permanent trustee with expanded authority. The reduced distributions would continue, but with an annual review process. We prepared to leave, Margaret approached me. I meant what I said about your management. It's impressive. Thank you. I also want you to know, I'm not doing this out of greed. I have a successful career, a good life. But I watched my mother struggle for years because of our father's cowardice. This is about justice. I understand. She paused. I think you do. We're not so different, you and I. The responsible ones in a family of takers. After everyone left, Harold and I sat in the conference room processing the day's events. That was masterfully handled, he said. You gave them just enough rope to hang themselves. I didn't expect Margaret to support my position. She's smart. She knows you're the one protecting the asset. Without you, they'd have blown through everything years ago. What happens now? Now? You implement the new structure. They'll adjust or they won't. Either way, you've done your duty. I looked out the window at the city lights. You know what? The irony is, all of this started because they made me sit at the kids' table. Such a small thing to destroy a family over. No, Harold said gently. All of this started because they never valued what you brought to the table. The kids' table was just the final insult. He was right. The Thanksgiving seating had been symbolic of a lifetime of dismissal. But now, the power dynamics had shifted. Irrevocably. They needed me more than I needed them. As I gathered my things, my phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. Heard about the meeting. Proud of you. See you Monday? At least one relationship in the family remained intact. Perhaps that was enough. I noticed there seems to be a significant issue with Part 6. It appears to be corrupted, with repeated quotation marks and fragmented text. Let me provide you with a properly written Part 6 that maintains the narrative flow and meets your requirements. The aftermath of the New Year's Eve meeting rippled through the Sterling family, like a seismic event. January brought a cold reality that matched the winter weather. The first reduced distribution hit their accounts on the 15th, and for the first time in their lives, Christopher and Charlotte faced the prospect of living within actual means. Tyler's commitment to the bakery deepened. He arrived earlier, stayed later, and began taking on management responsibilities. One crisp January morning, he proposed an idea that would change everything. What if we opened that second location? He looked up from the dough he was kneading, flour dusting his apron. There's a perfect space available near the university. Corner spot, great foot traffic. I glanced up from the inventory sheets. That's a prime location. The rent alone? I've been looking into it. He pulled out hand-drawn plans. College students need coffee, quick breakfasts. We could do a smaller menu, focus on grab-and-go items. Maybe even partner with the university's culinary program for internships. His enthusiasm was infectious, but the timing was complicated. Tyler, with everything going on with your family, that's exactly why we should do this now. He wiped his hands on his apron, meeting my eyes. I know what you're thinking. But I'm 18 now. I can make my own decisions. And with Harold's investment offer, we could make this happen. Before I could respond, the bell above the door chimed. Margaret Winters entered, looking every inch the successful businesswoman in her tailored suit and designer heels. This was her first visit to the bakery since the New Year's meeting. Madison, I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all. Tyler, why don't you check on the sourdough starters? He nodded, understanding the dismissal, but not before giving Margaret an appraising look. He'd heard about our newly discovered half-sister but hadn't met her yet. Margaret surveyed the bakery with obvious approval. This is impressive. Not what I expected from the trust fund baby narrative your siblings have been spinning. They're good at controlling narratives. Coffee? Please. She settled onto a stool at the counter. I wanted to talk to you about the lawsuit. Christopher's filed? I poured her a cup of our signature blend. His lawyer served papers last week. Breach of fiduciary duty, they're claiming. Ridiculous. Your management has been exemplary. She took a sip, raising an eyebrow appreciatively. This is excellent. Colombian? Guatemalan, actually. Single origin from a small cooperative. I studied her over the espresso machine. Why are you really here, Margaret? She smiled, a gesture that didn't quite reach her eyes. Direct. I like that. I'm here because I think we could be useful to each other. How so? Your siblings are going to make this ugly. They're already planting stories in the society pages. Poor Christopher and Charlotte, cut off by their vindictive sister. You know how these narratives work in our circles? I'm not part of those circles. No, but the trust is, and perception matters in legal proceedings. She leaned forward. I have connections, media contacts, people who could help balance the narrative. In exchange for what? Nothing you weren't already planning to give me. My 25% over 5 years. I just want to ensure our siblings don't find a way to overturn your decisions through public pressure or judicial sympathy. The bell chimed again. This time, Harold Wetherington entered, followed by a younger man I didn't recognize. Harold's face brightened when he saw me. Madison, perfect timing. This is James Chen, the contractor I mentioned. He's looked at the university location. James shook my hand firmly. It's a great space. Needs work, but the bones are solid. I can have preliminary estimates by tomorrow. I haven't decided. Just look at the numbers, Harold interrupted gently. No commitment. But opportunities like this don't wait. Margaret watched this exchange with interest. Expanding already? Potentially, I said carefully. We're exploring options. The morning rush began, cutting our conversation short. Margaret left with a promise to be in touch, while Harold and James grabbed a table to discuss renovation possibilities. I threw myself into the familiar rhythm of serving customers, but my mind churned with possibilities and pitfalls. During a brief lull, Tyler reappeared at my side. That was our half-sister, wasn't it? Yes, she seems intense. She's protective of her interests. Can't blame her for that. Do you trust her? I considered the question while pulling a shot of espresso. I trust her to act in her own best interest. Right now, that aligns with mine. That's enough. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor. Charlotte appeared just after the lunch rush, looking uncomfortable in her designer clothes among our casual clientele. She'd never visited the bakery before. "Madison, we need to talk. I'm working. This is important." Her voice held an edge of desperation. "It's about William." I glanced at Tyler, who nodded. "I've got this covered. Go ahead." I led Charlotte to my office, a cramped space above the kitchen. She perched on the edge of a chair, her usual poise cracking. "William's leaving me." The announcement shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. "When?" "He filed yesterday. Says he can't watch me destroy myself anymore, that I need to face reality." She laughed bitterly. Reality. As if he understands what that means. "What do you want from me, Charlotte?" "I need the trust distributions restored. Without that money, I can't fight the divorce properly. I can't maintain it." She gestured vaguely. "Everything." "You mean your lifestyle?" "My life, Madison. It's the same thing." "No, it's not. And that's your problem." I leaned back in my chair. "You've confused having things with being someone. William sees that. He's offering you a chance to find out who you really are. Don't psychoanalyze me. I need practical help. Then here's practical advice. Accept his terms. Downsize. Find work. Build something real." Her face hardened. "You're enjoying this. Watching us all fall apart. I'm not enjoying anything, but I'm not enabled anymore either." I stood, signaling the end of our conversation. "The trust will provide for your basic needs: housing, food, healthcare. The rest is up to you." She left without another word, her heels clicking angrily down the stairs. I returned to the kitchen to find Tyler deep in conversation with Harold and James. "The numbers work," Harold was saying. "With the right marketing, the university location could be profitable within 6 months. And the trust situation?" I asked. "Won't affect this. The bakery's a separate entity. Your siblings can't touch it." James spread out architectural plans on the prep table. "We could have it ready by March, April at the latest, just in time for graduation season." I studied the plans. The space was perfect. Corner location, lots of natural light, room for both seating and quick service. Tyler watched me eagerly. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think it's a big step." "The right step," Harold added. "You've built something valuable here. Time to grow it." That evening, after closing, I sat in the empty bakery with a glass of wine, considering the future. The lawsuit would be ugly, but I had truth on my side. The expansion was risky, but calculated. And the family? Well, they'd either adapt or continue their descent into irrelevance. My phone buzzed. A text from Tyler. "Thanks for believing in me and for teaching me what matters. Whatever happens with the family, we've got this." I smiled, typing back. "Yes, we do." Another text arrived, this one from William. "Left Charlotte. Trying to explain to the kids. Thank you for speaking the truth when no one else would. She needs to hit bottom before she can rebuild." Then Margaret. "Dinner tomorrow. We should strategize. The media campaign starts Monday." And finally, Harold. "Contractor needs an answer by Friday. I believe in this. More importantly, I believe in you." The bakery was quiet, but my life had never been louder. The kids' table had become a boardroom table, and the woman they'd dismissed as a simple baker was reshaping the Sterling family's future. I raised my glass to the empty room. Here's to phase 2. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Christopher's lawsuit, Charlotte's divorce, Margaret's media campaign, the expansion decision. But tonight, I sat in my kingdom of flour and butter, content in the knowledge that I'd finally stepped out of the shadows and into my own light. The family trust had been the catalyst, but this bakery, this business, this life I'd built, this was my true inheritance. and nobody could take that away. The grand opening of Sweet Dreams University Square took place on a perfect April morning. Cherry blossoms lined the street, their petals dancing in the spring breeze. Tyler stood beside me, wearing his new manager's uniform, crisp white shirt, navy apron with our logo embroidered in gold thread. His parents hadn't come. "Nervous?" I asked, adjusting the grand opening banner. "Excited," he corrected, grinning. "Look at that line. Students, professors, and..." Locals stretched around the corner. Harold had been right about the location. The university community had embraced us immediately, drawn by our reputation and Tyler's innovative menu additions, study fuel smoothies, protein-packed breakfast bowls, late-night exam survival kits. Margaret arrived precisely at 9, accompanied by a photographer from the City Tribune. "Perfect timing," she said, surveying the crowd. "This makes a better story than your siblings' victim narrative." Over the past 3 months, she'd orchestrated a masterful media campaign. Feature articles about women entrepreneurs, profiles of family businesses giving back to their communities, stories about our internship program with the culinary school, never mentioning the Sterling name directly, but providing a powerful counter-narrative to Christopher and Charlotte's public complaints. "The reporter wants to interview you both," Margaret continued. "Local family business training next generation, human interest angle." Tyler straightened his shoulders. "What about the lawsuit? Won't they ask about that?" "Let them," I said. "We've got nothing to hide." The opening ceremony began with Dean Morrison from the culinary school. She spoke about partnerships between education and industry, about second chances and new beginnings. When she introduced Tyler as our scholarship program's first recipient, the crowd erupted in applause. I caught a glimpse of familiar faces in the crowd. Jorge, beaming with pride at his protégé. Several of our regular customers from the original location. And there, trying to blend in behind a group of students, William. He approached after the ribbon cutting, looking healthier than I'd seen him in years. The stress lines had softened, his posture straighter. "Congratulations," he said, shaking my hand. "This is impressive. How are the kids handling everything?" "Better than expected. They're living with me full-time now. Smaller house, public school, but they're adjusting. Actually thriving, if I'm honest." "And Charlotte?" His expression darkened. "Still fighting the divorce. Still blaming everyone but herself." "But that's not my problem anymore." He paused. "The kids want to visit. Would that be okay? They miss their cousin." "Of course. Tyler would love to see them." As William disappeared into the crowd, Harold emerged with a distinguished-looking couple. "Madison, I'd like you to meet Robert and Patricia Chen. They own the Chen Restaurant Group." "We've been following your story," Patricia said, shaking my hand. "Impressive growth trajectory. We're particularly interested in your community engagement model." "We're exploring franchise opportunities," Robert added. "Looking for concepts that combine profitability with social responsibility. Harold speaks very highly of your operation." Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew our attention. Christopher had arrived, looking out of place in his expensive suit among the college crowd. He pushed through the line, his face flushed with anger. "Madison, we need to talk. Now." "Christopher, this isn't the time." "Then when is the time?" "You ignore my calls, my lawyer's letters. You can't keep avoiding this." The crowd fell silent, sensing drama. Margaret stepped forward, but I held up a hand. This had been coming for months. "What do you want, Christopher?" "What's rightfully mine. Ours. The trust our parents left us. Not for you to control like some dictator." "The trust is being managed according to its terms. The court upheld that last month." His face reddened further. "Because you manipulated the system, turned the judge against us with your sob story about responsibility and fiscal management." "No. Because I presented facts, 20 years of financial records, documented waste, failed ventures. The judge saw the truth. The truth? He laughed bitterly. The truth is you're punishing us for not taking your little hobby seriously, for treating you like what you are, the family disappointment who couldn't cut it in the real world. The words hung in the air like poison. I felt Tyler tense beside me, saw Jorge's hands clench into fists, but I remained calm. The real world? I gestured around us. This is the real world, Christopher. A business that employs 30 people. A training program that's changed lives. Community partnerships that make a difference. What have you built besides debt? I've built relationships, connections, things that matter in society. Connections that disappeared the moment the money ran out. Where are the Wetheringtons now? The country club crowd? Your investor friends? He deflated slightly. The truth was evident. Without the trust fund to prop up his lifestyle, his carefully cultivated network had evaporated. It's not too late, I said, softening my tone. The trust will still provide for your needs, but you have to meet the requirements. Show fiscal responsibility. Present a real business plan. Get a job. A job? The word seemed foreign to him. I'm 50 years old. What am I supposed to do? Work retail? Work anywhere. Earn something. Build something real instead of chasing schemes. Like your nephew? He gestured dismissively at Tyler. Playing baker instead of preparing for his future? Tyler stepped forward, his voice steady. I am preparing for my future, Dad. I'm learning. Business management, customer service, financial planning. Real skills. And I'm earning my own money for the first time in my life. Christopher stared at his son as if seeing him for the first time. We gave you everything. The best schools, the best opportunities. You gave me things. Madison gave me purpose. The silence stretched between them. Then Christopher turned back to me, his anger replaced by something like defeat. 20,000, he said quietly. That's all I need to get through the month. Rebecca's left, took the kids to her mother's. The house is in foreclosure. I've got nothing. You've got the same opportunity everyone else has, to start over, to build something real. I don't know how. Then learn. The way Tyler did. The way I did. The way anyone who's ever built anything from nothing did. He stood there, shoulders sagging, the fight gone out of him. For a moment, I saw not the arrogant older brother who'd tormented me for years, but a lost man facing the consequences of a lifetime of entitlement. There's a position, I said finally. At the original location. Night shift, helping with the baking prep. Minimum wage plus tips. Jorge could train you. His eyes widened. You're offering me a job? As a baker? As a prep assistant. If you're interested. The crowd watched, fascinated by this family drama playing out in public. Christopher looked around, perhaps finally seeing how the real world viewed him, not as a successful businessman, but as a middle-aged man who'd squandered every opportunity. I'll think about it, he mumbled, then pushed his way back, through the crowd. As the excitement died down and the crowd returned to celebration, Margaret appeared at my elbow. That was generous, more than he deserved. Maybe. But someone once gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it either. She studied. Me. You're not talking about trust. No, I'm talking about my grandmother. She saw something in me when everyone else saw the family disappointment. She taught me to bake, but more importantly, she taught me to see value where others saw none. And you think Christopher has hidden value? I think everyone does. Sometimes, it just takes hitting bottom to find it. The rest of the day passed in a blur of customers, interviews, and celebrations. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I stood outside the new location with Tyler, watching the last customers leave. Think he'll take the job? Tyler asked. I don't know. That's up to him. You've given him more chances than he deserves. Maybe. But isn't that what family does? Not enable, but offer opportunities for redemption? Tyler smiled. Is that what you did for me? No. You earned everything you've got. You showed up, worked hard, learned, grew. That's all on you. A car pulled up to the curb. Charlotte emerged, looking unlike I'd ever seen her. Dressed in simple jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, no designer labels in sight. I heard about Christopher, she said without preamble. About the job offer. News travels. Fast. He called me, ranting at first, then confused. Like he couldn't understand why you'd help him. And you? Do you understand? She was quiet for a moment. I'm starting to. These past months, I've had time to think. Without the constant shopping, the parties, the social obligations. William was right. I didn't know who I was without all that. And now? Now I'm figuring it out. I've been seeing a therapist. Got a part-time job at the library. It's not much, but it's real. That's a start. I also wanted to apologize. For Thanksgiving, for everything. We treated you terribly. You did what you thought was normal, what our parents modeled. That's not an excuse. No, but it's an explanation. And understanding the why helps with forgiveness. She looked at the bustling bakery, at Tyler confidently managing the closing procedures. You built something amazing here. Both locations, the programs, the community, involvement. It's what our grandparents would have wanted. They wanted us to be responsible stewards, to build rather than consume, to contribute rather than take. I'm trying to learn that. It's hard, starting over at 42. But not impossible. She smiled, a genuine expression I hadn't seen in years. No, not impossible, just difficult, like everything worthwhile. As she left, Harold approached the Chens. Madison, they're interested in discussing a pilot program. 3 locations in their restaurants, featuring your products and training methods. It's an incredible opportunity, Patricia Chen added. Your community-focused model aligns perfectly with our company values. We talked for another hour, sketching out possibilities. A franchise system that prioritized social impact alongside profit. Training programs for at-risk youth. Partnerships with local suppliers. Everything I'd dreamed of when I first started. Baking. Later that evening, as I finally locked up the new location, I found an envelope slipped under the door. Inside was a handwritten note. Madison, I've thought about your offer. I'll take the job. Not because I have no other choice, but because maybe it's time I learned what real work means. Thank you for the opportunity. Christopher, I stood there in the empty bakery, holding the note, thinking about how far we'd all come. The kids' table that had sparked this revolution seemed like a lifetime ago. That simple act of exclusion had set in motion a chain of events that transformed not just the family finances, but the family itself. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Saw the news coverage. Excellent positioning. The narrative has completely shifted. Well done. Another from Tyler. Best opening day ever. Can't wait for tomorrow. Thank you for believing in me. And one from William. Heard about Christopher. You're a better person than any of us deserve. The kids want to know if they can work at the bakery this summer? I smiled, typing back responses. The family was healing, slowly, painfully, but genuinely. Not the artificial unity of formal dinners and false pretenses, but real connection born from struggle and growth. The trust would survive. The business would thrive. And the Sterling family? We were finally becoming what our grandparents had, always hoped, not just inheritors of wealth, but creators of value. As I drove home through the quiet streets, I passed Christopher's darkened mansion, now bearing a foreclosure notice. Charlotte's empty McMansion stood like a monument to excess. But ahead lay my modest apartment above the original bakery, warm lights glowing in the windows, the scent of tomorrow's bread already rising. The kids' table had been meant to diminish me. Instead, it had freed me to find my true place. Not at their table, begging for acceptance, but at my own table, building something lasting. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as insults. Sometimes losing your place helps you find your purpose. And sometimes being excluded from the family table allows you to create a table where everyone is welcome. The Sterling family trust was secure. The Sterling family business was thriving. And the Sterling family itself? We were finally growing up. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Christopher's first day of real work. Charlotte's continued journey toward authenticity. Tyler's expanding responsibilities. The Chen partnership. Negotiations. Margaret's ongoing media strategy. But tonight I celebrated quietly. Not with champagne and caviar, but with a simple cup of tea and a slice of fresh bread. The same bread my grandmother had taught me to make all those years ago, when she saw something in me that no one else did. "Thank you," I whispered to her, memory, "for teaching me that true wealth isn't what you inherit but what you create." The kids' table had been their choice. The head of the table was mine, and everyone, even those who had once excluded me, now had a standing invitation to join. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.